Dragon SpaceX on the big loop with visual depress started. We're expecting an undock time of 12:40.
Copy 12:40. Thanks.
As the team continues to step through those procedures ahead of the undocking and port relocation of Crew-8 this morning, we are now targeting a command to be sent for undocking at 7:40 a.m. Central, with physical separation occurring at about 7:45 a.m. Central Time this morning. And we are targeting a redock to the zenith port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station at 8:28 a.m. Central. And if you are just joining us this morning, we are covering live the port relocation of Crew-8 from the forward port of the Harmony module to the zenith port of the International Space Station in preparation for the Boeing Starliner vehicle to arrive next week.
Right, and this will just be a very short procedure. Dragon will be moving from IDA-2, where the forward-facing Harmony port, to IDA-3 on the zenith or space-facing side of the Harmony port. So it will be a very short trip, just about 45 minutes for the entire undocking procedure and redocking procedure.
This morning, the team in Mission Control Houston, as well as SpaceX, did work through a decrease in SpaceX cabin pressure, but the team now does understand that issue being due to one of the valves that controls cabin humidity inside Dragon. After looking into the decrease, SpaceX and Mission Control Houston are comfortable and are stepping through the next procedures ahead of undocking. At this time, we are around an hour down from the expected timeline, targeting the undocking command to be sent at 7:40 a.m. Central. We'll see physical separation at 7:45 a.m. Central, and expecting redocking to occur to that zenith port at 8:28 a.m. Central.
Houston Station, Big Loop, just checking in at 7.4 that IEV is deactivated.
Yes, that's correct. IMV is deactivated.
Roger, thanks.
Currently, if you're just now joining us, we are looking at a live view inside of Dragon Endeavour, and we can see the Commander Matthew Dominic in seat 2, as well as Michael Barrett in seat 3 in the pilot seat, as we prepare for the relocation of Dragon from IDA 2 to IDA 3. And as we were going through preparations, we were reviewing some data, noticing some data that may have been something to look into, but we did confirm that there are no issues with Dragon, and everything is proceeding nominally with the Dragon spacecraft.
That's right, Jesse. And the APAS hatch, the Androgynous Peripheral Assembly System hatch inside the International Space Station is now closed.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. I made a couple comm check attempts on Dragon ground. Wanted to see if you were hearing those. I am not getting comm from you.
there. We were waiting a little bit. We made a couple time checks. We were doing a ground check again.
Okay, copy that.
And as you heard, the teams are working on some comm checks. This is to make sure that they do have communication between Dragon and ground during the redocking operation. Sounds like they're working through this procedure right now.
And this view inside the International Space Station of NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. Again, she's working through those hatch closure procedures. The A-pass hatch is closed. Following this, they will depressurize the vestibule. That's the area that will be exposed to vacuum following the undocking of Dragon. Dragon will be moving from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner vehicle arrival with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams. Starliner is slated to launch on Tuesday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. Central. But again, before that launch, we do need to move Dragon to the zenith port to allow Starliner to dock to that forward port. The team was working an issue earlier this morning with one of the valves that controls humidity in the cabin not behaving properly. However, that issue has since been better understood and resolved, and the team is now proceeding through the undocking procedures. We are targeting the undocking command to be sent at 7:40 a.m. Central. About 5 minutes later, we'll see the physical separation. It takes about 5 minutes for the umbilicals to retract and for the 12 hooks that hold Dragon to the International Space Station to retract.
Space Station, note to forward hatch and MPEV are closed. And I'll put the photos on SSE lane team.
Here's the copy.
And so those words from NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson down to the ground, letting them know that hatch closure is complete.
SpaceX on the big loop for the Dragon ground comm. We think the routing is set up incorrectly on our side, so we're doing some troubleshooting there. I will initiate a comm check once we have it to the correct configuration.
That makes sense. We had tried Martin as well. And we said, and everybody tried to so that looks like.
And as we just heard, we are working through some comms communication issues. It sounds like we are going to attempt to rewire on the ground side to make sure that these comms do work properly during this relocation procedure. And again, this is exactly why we do these checks, these suit checks, the comms checks. That is to make sure that we do have everything working properly during these procedures.
On your screen, you are seeing the pilot of Crew Dragon Endeavour, NASA astronaut Mike Barrett on your screen. To his right, you see the hand of the commander of Dragon, that is NASA astronaut Mike Barrett, Matthew Dominic rather. And on the far left of the screen there is Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin. And on the far right of the screen, out of view at this moment, is NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps. Crew-8 launched to the International Space Station on March 4th and undocked a day later on March 5th. They did dock to the Harmony Forward module, which they are still currently docked to, but they are going to be moving to the Zenith port of the International Space Station this morning. And there you see the crew on your screen. Again, Crew-8 is made up of Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin and NASA astronauts Mike Barrett, Matt Dominic, and Jeanette Epps.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground, check.
Dragon PLC check, Dragon to ground.
I have you loud and clear. We did confirm that it was a big issue on the ground side, so good check on Dragon to ground.
Copy.
Great news there. We were able to resolve the configuration issue on the ground side for the comms checks and just got some good comms between Dragon to ground. Again, this is exactly why we do these comms checks. Again, to make sure that everything is functioning properly. We did have a configuration issue on the ground side, and we're able to catch that during these comms checks, resolve it, and just got a good comms check right now.
As the team continues to step through those procedures ahead of undocking, we are now targeting a new undocking time of 7:50 a.m. Central for the undocking command to be sent. About 5 minutes later, we will see physical separation following the umbilicals retracting and the 12 hooks that lock Dragon to the International Space Station being retracted. So 7:55 a.m. for physical separation and undocking of Dragon. And we are targeting 7:38 a.m. Central for redocking to the zenith port of the International Space Station. 8:38 a.m. Central. The International Space Station is currently flying 260 statute miles over the northern coast of Australia. We are continuing to get good views inside Endeavour of the pilot, NASA astronaut Mike Barrett, as he works through those procedures on the screens. Today's undocking will be autonomous, however the crew does have the capability to control Dragon if required. And those leak checks are continuing. We are expecting words on status here shortly. And if you are just joining us this morning, you are looking at a view inside the Crew-8 Dragon Endeavour. Today we are covering a port relocation of Endeavour from the
Dragon SpaceX time update. Dragon, we're going to delay our undock target to 1250, 1250 UTC. We've completed the initial depress and are currently performing the wake check.
The updated undock time is 1250.
Also copy 1250.
And TC Houston on the big loop, that means that the exercise and shutter close constraints are extended by an hour and 10 minutes, 70 minutes.
Roger that, thanks.
And so those words to the crew of Crew-8. The new target undocking time is 7:55 a.m. Central Time for physical separation, and we are targeting a redocking on the Zenith port at 8:30 a.m. Central Time for that redocking. You also heard words from the ground up to NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson regarding some exercise constraints and shutter constraints. The crew on board the International Space Station does exercise for several hours a day to maintain their bone density and muscle health. However, during some of these more dynamic operations, they do put a pause on those exercises to prevent imparting loads on the International Space Station. Additionally, the shutters are closed during some of these more dynamic operations just as a precautionary measure. Thank you.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop port relocation is enabled.
Copy.
And so to go back to those shutters a little bit, the two sets of shutters that will be closed during this operation are the cupola shutters. The cupola is the window to the world of the International Space Station and has several windows where the crew can look out, take imagery, and even do Earth observation experiments. And the lab shutters will also be closed. Of course, the lab is where the crew conducts that vital science and research investigations on board the International Space Station.
Station Houston on the big loop, in preparation for undock, perform step 1 of 1.602 Dragon port relocation monitoring. Undock sequence start time is 12:50, 12:50.
Station copy, step 1 more. 1.602.
And those words up to NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson, who will be monitoring today's undocking and redocking as part of this port relocation. We are getting a view inside Mission Control Houston here. Today's team of Orbit 1 is being supported by NASA Flight Director Paul Kanya. And we are getting a view of Paul there, as well as the Capcom or capsule communicator Neil Nagata. He is the individual that is speaking to NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. As we await those Dragon vestibule leak checks to be complete, let's take a little look ahead about some of the events that we expect to see this morning. At 7:50 a.m. Central, the undocking command will be sent from the ground to Dragon. Following this, about 5 minutes later, at 7:55 a.m. Central, we will see physical separation. Once the umbilicals retract, those umbilicals do hold or provide power between the space station and Dragon, and then we will need to have the 12 hooks that hold Dragon into place retract before we do actually see that physical separation occur. After that, Dragon will fire its thrusters in two very short bursts to help break the stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and physical separation from the station will occur. Dragon will begin to slowly back away from the International Space Station, and then will hold at approximately 60 meters away from the space station. At that point, a check will occur, and if the ground teams believe everything is looking good, Dragon will begin to move in front of the International Space Station to above it. And that is the relocation maneuver, or you might hear it called transition maneuver on the loops this morning. We expect this maneuver to take about 25 minutes, and then Dragon will arrive to the zenith port of the International Space Station. But before it does dock, there will be a check-in halfway at what you call the midpoint. At this point, again, it will stop and hold about 60 meters above the Node 2 zenith port before preparing for final approach. Once we reach that area, flight controllers and Hawthorne will...
Dragon undock and departure review complete, and ISS crew is ready for departure.
Houston copies.
And good words there. The crew aboard the International Space Station ready for Crew-8 port relocation this morning. So again, once we are in that 60-meter hold above the Node 2 zenith port, the flight controllers in Hawthorne will once again command Dragon to begin its approach, flying until it reaches a waypoint. It reaches the waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is just 20 meters away from the space station, and once Dragon does reach that 20 meters, it will hold one final time for teams on the ground and the astronauts aboard Dragon to do a final check before docking. And if everything continues to go per our updated timeline, we are expecting that redocking to occur at 8:38 a.m. Central Time this morning. Following docking, Dragon's soft capture system will retract to bring the Dragon spacecraft in closer for hard capture, and that's accomplished by deploying 12 hooks to firmly hold Dragon in place, and in all that procedure takes about 15 minutes. Following docking this morning, flight controllers will then configure Dragon for dock operations and connect power and data to the spacecraft once more, and the crew will be able to get out of their spacesuits, set them up to dry, and then begin operations to get the hatches back open, which includes pressurizing the vestibule and a new round of leak checks.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching the port relocation of Crew-8 Dragon Endeavor with the Crew-8 members on board. Today is their 57th day on station for this crew, who lifted off from Kennedy Space Center on March 4th at 9:53 p.m. Eastern Time. They arrived at station about 24 hours later. So far, the crew members during this mission have dedicated hundreds of hours to science research in the orbiting laboratory. This mission is the 8th certified crew mission for NASA and SpaceX, which is a part of the agency's commercial crew program. And it's been almost 4 years since Demo 2, but since then, SpaceX has been regularly flying crew missions for NASA to and from the International Space Station at an average cadence of about one flight every 6 months since Crew 1. Crew-8 marks SpaceX's ninth human space flight for NASA, which includes Demo 2. Altogether, SpaceX's 4 Dragon Crew spacecrafts have completed 7 human spaceflight missions on behalf of NASA and visited the station about 40 times, which includes Crew-8's arrival to the space station under the NASA Commercial Resupply Services and Commercial Crew programs. Again, currently we are performing preparation for undocking from the International Space Station from the IDA-2 and will transition Dragon to IDA-3, the Zenith port, and relocate the Dragon Endeavor spacecraft, which will take about 45 minutes from the start of docking to redocking.
And if you are just joining us this morning, you're looking at a live view inside the Dragon Endeavour vehicle of NASA astronaut and pilot of Dragon, Mike Barrett. We are covering a port relocation this morning of Dragon from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony of the International Space Station. This is in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner vehicle launch. That launch will carry NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams to the International Space Station as part of a test flight slated to launch on Tuesday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. Monday, May 6th, rather. This morning, the team in Mission Control Houston is being led by Flight Director Paul Kanya. Again, this morning, SpaceX and the team here in Mission Control Houston did work through a decrease in Dragon cabin pressure due to one of the valves that controls humidity inside Dragon. The team took some time to look into it and have determined relocation can continue. We are now targeting a new undocking time of 7:55 a.m. Central for physical separation and targeting a redocking to the zenith port of Harmony at 8:38 a.m. Central Time this morning. And here in Mission Control Houston, the Flight Director Paul Kanya is now polling the team for a go, no-go to proceed with port relocation this morning. And as we continue to march towards an undocking at 7:55 a.m. Central Time this morning, we are getting a view of the Dragon currently docked to the forward port of the International Space Station. Again, today's docking will bring Dragon from that forward port up and above the International Space Station to the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module. Here on your screen, you can see that Dragon is, of course, still docked to the forward port. You can see the nose cone is open. That nose cone does open shortly after launch and remains open all the way through the docked period of time. It does close once we do undock for a return home as we approach the entry interface portion of the flight. Also attached to Dragon is the trunk and the solar arrays. That also remains attached to Dragon during the dock portion.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Blue. Leak checks have passed. We are proceeding with residual depressurization and final configure for undock.
Seconds happens.
And we did just hear that those leak checks are complete and successful, everything looking good from that perspective. Earlier this morning, the mission control team in Houston, as well as SpaceX, did work through a decrease in Dragon cabin pressure. The team took some time to perform data analysis and have determined the valve is healthy and have better understood the readings on that pressure drop that occurred. That valve now functioning nominally, and we are proceeding toward an undocking and relocation, targeting 7:55 a.m. Central Time this morning for physical separation and undocking of Dragon, and 8:38 a.m. Central for the redocking of Dragon to the zenith port of the International Space Station's Harmony module.
If you're just joining us, what you're seeing on your screen is a view of mission control in Hawthorne at SpaceX. We are just awaiting the procedures for undocking of Dragon Endeavour to begin to push away from the International Space Station and reorients itself to redock to the zenith port, or IDA-3. This process will take about 45 minutes from the start of the undocking maneuver. And Dragon is fully autonomous. It's a fully autonomous vehicle, so it will autonomously perform this relocation today with the crew monitoring Dragon. In the case of any emergency, the crew can take over the Dragon spacecraft, but in nominal operations, Dragon is autonomous and can perform all of these procedures on its own. And again, we are expecting undocking to begin at 7:55 a.m. Central Time with an expected redocking at 8:28 a.m. Central Time. Excuse me, 8:38 a.m. Central Time for redocking expectation.
And we are a little less than 3 minutes away from that undocking command to be sent to Dragon. Again, it does take about 5 minutes for Dragon to actually physically separate from the International Space Station. Those umbilicals that are attached to Dragon and Space Station and provide that power will be retracted, as well as the 12 hooks that hold Dragon in place will also be retracted, enabling those two short firings to occur to break that stiction from Dragon and the International Space Station, and then at that point we will see physical separation. Targeting 7:55 a.m. Central Time this morning for that physical separation, and 7:50 a.m. for the undocking command to be sent from the ground to Dragon.
Dragon, you were garbled there, and just for awareness, will be about 12:51 for our undock time.
Copies. We get advisors closed for undock.
Copy, advisors closed.
And you did hear that call. They're now targeting 7:51 a.m. Central for the undocking command to be sent. The crew also did let us know that their visors are...
On a big loop. Dragon is transmitting video. Please confirm video and data are updating in the Dragon docking monitor.
Can confirm video and data on the Dragon docking monitor.
Roger.
We did hear that call out about the visors being closed. The crew will keep their visors closed during this more dynamic phase of the mission as they do undock from the forward port of Harmony to the Zenith and redock to the Zenith port of Harmony. They're expecting that undocking command to be sent in about a minute.
On Starliner next week, we will be sending the undock command here in a few moments.
Copies.
Station Easton on a big loop. Perform step 2 through the end and 1.602 Dragon port relocation monitoring.
This crew is ready for Dragon undocking. Welcome to the end of 1.602. Make way for CST.
Undock sequence commanded.
And the command was sent to undock Dragon from the forward port of the International Space Station to the Zenith port. The umbilicals are now retracting. It will take about 5 minutes before we do see physical separation. That is to allow those 12 hooks that are attaching Dragon to the space station to retract. And those umbilicals now demated.
Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
The first set of hooks is now opening. Again, there's 12 hooks in all, but there's 2 sets of 6. So those first 6 hooks are now underway of opening. Everything looking good for hook opening so far. And we are in a brief handover between our satellites, but we are expecting to get imagery in time to actually see a Dragon undock this morning. That first set of hooks is continuing to open up, everything looking good on that end. And if you're just joining us this morning, we are in the process of undocking of a port for a port relocation of the Crew-8 Dragon Endeavour from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner arrival next week. The first set of hooks is opening to release Dragon from the International Space Station. Once this first set is open, the next set of 6 will open up. And the first set of hooks is now open.
First set of hooks open and nominal.
Second.
Once the second set of 6 hooks open, 2 very short firings will occur to break the distinction between Dragon and the space station, and it's at that point which we will actually see the physical separation of Dragon occur. Second set of hooks continues to open as planned. Everything continuing to go smoothly in the second set of hooks opening. Second set of hooks open.
All hooks open and nominal.
Good.
And Dragon has undocked from the International Space Station at 7:57 a.m. east of the Bahamas. And that first burn has been completed and nominal.
Dragon separation visually confirmed.
Houston copies.
And those words of NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson on board Space Station, letting us know she does actually see physical separation herself. We are still in that handover between our satellites, but once we regain communications, we'll see views.
Relocation burn is complete.
and all of the undocking burns were successful. And as Dragon continues to back away from the International Space Station, it's working to acquire its LiDAR tracking, which will be used by Dragon to autonomously execute the relocation maneuver.
Station, ISIS, sending over, block Charlie.
Houston copies.
And so we are expecting a hold at 60 meters away from the International Space Station. If Dragon does go past that 60-meter mark, it can approach back to the 60-meter mark distance before the relocation maneuver.
Dragon SpaceX. Dragon has reacquired. The ground will be commanding a hold here shortly.
And we did hear that call out that the hold is now going to begin here shortly. And if you're just joining us this morning, the Crew Dragon Endeavour undocked from the International Space Station as part of a port relocation at 7:57 a.m. Central Time while flying east over the Bahamas. Dragon undocked from the forward port of Harmony and will relocate to the zenith port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner crew arrival. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams are slated to launch on Starliner on Monday.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Ground has confirmed good relative navigation performance, and we will be commanding a go to relocate shortly. You have a go to raise your visors.
Second copy.
And everything continuing to proceed as expected this morning. The crew did get the go to put their visors up now that they are past some of the more dynamic phases of the undocking. And Dragon is go for that translational maneuver to help move it up in front of the International Space Station ahead of its docking to the zenith port or space-facing port of the space station. Everything continuing to go smoothly this morning following the undocking of Dragon Endeavour from the space station at 7:57 a.m. Central. Dragon is making its way to the zenith port of the International Space Station, but before it does get there, there will be a midpoint hold. This will allow the team to check out and make sure everything is looking good for the trajectory ahead of redocking. Excuse me.
If you're just now joining us, you are tuned in to the relocation of the Dragon Endeavour with the Crew-8 crew on board Dragon. That is just in case of any off-nominal situations that may happen. The crew is prepared to return back to Earth if necessary, but so far, as Sandra has been mentioning, everything is proceeding as nominal. We are in the process of translating Dragon, and in the undocking and relocation maneuvering, as Dragon is being moved from the forward-facing port on the Harmony module, the IDA-2, and moving towards the zenith or space-facing port at IDA-3, and will be redocking to that location. Again, we are in process of that translation maneuver. As Sandra mentioned, there will be a hold through the maneuver, and these holds are there to make sure that we can check to make sure that everything is proceeding nominally.
SpaceX on the Bleak Loop, ground will be commanding relocate transfer to begin access transition. As a reminder, soft capture ring deploy will begin once you are in relocate to access, which is after the midpoint.
Copy, thank you.
And as we do await Dragon to reach that midpoint hold, everything continuing to go smoothly. Undocking did occur this morning at 7:57 a.m. Central Time. Following that, the umbilicals retracted, the hooks open, and a series of short burns occurred to break the stiction between Dragon and the International Space Station. Dragon then did complete a hold at 60 meters and is now swinging around, heading to the zenith port of the International Space Station. And we are getting our first view of Dragon now following that undocking. Dragon is about 62 meters away from the International Space Station at this point. And an even better view there on your screen, you can really see the nose cone open, you can see the solar arrays. Again, undocking did occur at 7:57 a.m. Central Time this morning. We are targeting redocking to the zenith port of the Harmony module to occur at 8:41 a.m. Central Time this morning.
Station Houston, big loop, monitor per step 6 now in 1.602.
Good work.
And some cool views there. You can see that Dragon is firing some of its thrusters as it is maneuvering its way to its new home location, the zenith port on the Harmony module. A great view there again of Dragon with the Crew-8 members on board. And you can see that the nose cone is deployed through this relocation from port to port. We do not need to close that nose cone as we do use the Draco thrusters, the forward bulkhead thrusters on the vehicle to perform this maneuver. So we'll keep that nose cone open, but it's typically there to be able to protect the docking system and guidance navigation system when those thrusters are not in use.
And Dragon is now about 60 meters away from the International Space Station. And so we are now getting a view on our screen of what Dragon's LiDAR system is seeing. That is the International Space Station's forward port where it just undocked from. As you can see, Dragon is beginning to make its way more in front of the space station as it prepares to redock on top of the International Space Station to the Zenith port of Harmony. Dragon is now 62 meters away from the International Space Station. Everything continuing to go smoothly this morning. And if you are just joining us this morning, we are covering the undocking of the Crew-8 Endeavour spacecraft from the forward port of Harmony, which you do see on your screen there, which Dragon undocked from at 7:57 a.m. Central Time this morning. Dragon is performing a relocation to the Zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station. You can see it there on the top of your screen. It's performing that relocation ahead of the launch of the Boeing Starliner crew. Starliner is slated to launch to the International Space Station on Monday evening. And as we continue to monitor today's port relocation, you are looking at a view inside Mission Control Houston.
SpaceX off the big loop, midpoint has been reached.
And that call out that the midpoint has been reached. There will be a brief hold here before the crew continues to proceed towards the Zenith port of the International Space Station. So again, you're looking at a view inside Mission Control Houston of the ICE officer on console, or the ISS systems engineer, Greg Anderson. He's one of two integrated positions with SpaceX alongside the VVO here in Mission Control Houston, or the visiting vehicle officer. They worked hand in hand this morning to troubleshoot and work through that issue that did delay undocking a bit, but everything proceeding as expected this morning at this point, and Dragon is continuing to make its way towards that Zenith port of the International Space Station ahead of its redocking. And we are getting a very nice view here of Dragon as it continues its approach. And as you can see in this view on your screen now, Dragon is really starting to swing up and above the International Space Station as it approaches the docking port on the Harmony module on the Zenith or space-facing side. Towards the back, you can see two circular arrays there. That is actually the Northrop Grumman Cygnus cargo vehicle that is currently docked to the International Space Station.
As Sandra mentioned, Dragon is swinging up to face the space-facing side of the Harmony module. It will remain approximately 60 meters away from the station throughout this entire process. And then once it is aligned with the docking axis, it can then begin to move towards the zenith port. And it'll move closer in about 20 meters and hold for alignment checks, checkouts of Dragon, checking for lighting conditions, and confirming that everybody will be ready for the final approach. So again, right now, Dragon is remaining about 60 meters away from the space station and will begin to move closer to the station once it is aligned with the docking axis.
And that midpoint has been reached as Dragon continues to swing up above the International Space Station. The next major milestone that we'll look towards is when Dragon is aligned to the docking axis. That essentially means Dragon is pretty much right in line with where it is slated to dock. Again, this is a fully autonomous operation this morning. Dragon is utilizing its LiDAR system to align with the docking axis and make its way up and above the International Space Station and provide that guidance for it. And just looking ahead a little bit, following that midpoint being reached, we will see Dragon continue its transition maneuver to the zenith docking axis, then hold for that LiDAR confirmation as we just discussed when it's pretty much right in front of the docking axis, and then Dragon will continue to make its way towards waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is approximately 20 meters away from the International Space Station. Once everything checks out there for the team on the ground, Dragon will continue to resume docking and final approach for a soft capture first, and then eventually a hard capture. We are expecting redocking to occur around 8:41 a.m. Central. Dragon continuing to approach that docking axis. We are expecting that alignment to occur in just a couple of minutes from now. Dragon is currently 56 meters away from the International Space Station, continuing to close in. And this view of Dragon on your screen as it continues to make its approach. As you can see, the nose cone is open, will remain open throughout this entire operation. You can also see a little view of the docking hooks. If you look in the very center of that circle there, there's a couple of almost triangular looking objects. Those are the docking hooks that help to drive the Dragon towards the International Space Station. There are 12 hooks in all. They drive and undrive in sets of 6. So once Dragon does make soft capture with the International Space Station, those hooks will drive to create that hard latch between Dragon and the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control Houston, Flight Director on console during this shift, Paul Kanya, is now going to poll the team on if they are go for approaching to waypoint 2, which is again 20 meters away from the International Space Station. He's also going to poll the team on if they are ready for the actual docking procedure to occur as well.
Sandra mentioned, the Dragon spacecraft is currently about 60 meters away, but when we do approach to waypoint 2, that is about 28 meters away from
Dragon
station.
SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has arrived at the second 60-meter hold point and is configured for docking. Please confirm your readiness for approach 1.
Crew-8 ready for approach 1.
Copy that.
As we heard those comms, we did reach the second hold, that 60-meter hold. Waiting to approach waypoint 2. Again, that will be 20 meters away from station. And once we reach waypoint 2, then we can confirm final alignment, check out Dragon, check lighting conditions, make sure that the ground readiness, everyone is ready for final approach for docking today.
And Dragon is about 60 meters away from the space station. It is going to perform a hold at this point so the team can check everything out, make sure everything is looking good before Dragon does proceed to waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is 20 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, once Dragon reaches that point, there will be another brief hold before Dragon gets the go to proceed and eventually dock to the International Space Station. We are targeting that docking at 8:41 a.m. Central Time this morning. And as Dragon continues that hold at the 60-meter mark, the teams here in Mission Control Houston are evaluating if Dragon is ready to proceed towards waypoint 2. And we are hearing a go from the team here in Mission Control that they are ready to proceed towards waypoint 2, that 20-meter mark away from the International Space Station. Here you are getting a view inside Mission Control Houston this morning, the team being led by NASA Flight Director Paul Kanya.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for continued approach, and we will be commanding resume to approach waypoint 2.
Okay.
We just heard that confirmation that we are go for approaching waypoint 2. Again, that will be maneuvering from 60 meters away from the station.
Station
It's about
Houston,
20
on the
meters.
big loop. TC. Dragon is resuming approach to waypoint 2. Monitor per step 3 and 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
In step 3 of 1.102.
And again, Dragon did get the go from the team to proceed towards waypoint 2, which is 20 meters away from the International Space Station. Currently, Dragon is 54 meters away from the space station and continuing to close in.
And again, once they reach that 20-meter mark from station, they'll do some checkouts of Dragon, again, checking the lighting conditions, and again, confirming ground readiness for final approach for redocking to the International Space Station this morning. Again, expecting docking to occur approximately at 7:51 a.m. this morning. Excuse me, 7:41 a.m. Central Time this morning.
Dragon now less than 40 meters away from the space station, 35 meters and closing in. We will have a hold again at 20 meters away from the space station, targeting that docking at 8:41 a.m. Central Time, now less than 10 minutes away from now.
Just down on the Dragon.
Matt, was that visors down?
Affirmative. SpaceX visors are down for Dragon.
Copy, visors down. We are going to be holding here at waypoint 2 for a few minutes as we finish up configuration on the ISS side.
And with Dragon now at waypoint 2, that 20-meter mark away from the space station, they're going to complete another brief hold. You did hear the call out for the crew to ensure that their visors are down. They were able to put their visors up as they were making the translational move up and around, but now that they're approaching in for some of the more dynamic phases of this operation, they are going to put their visors down as a precautionary measure. And you are getting a view here of the team in Mission Control Houston. We did talk about the ICE officer, the ISS Systems Engineer Officer on console that is working very closely alongside SpaceX during these integrated operations. But there's also another console here in Mission Control Houston, our VVO or Visiting Vehicle Officer, Nick Fernald, who you see there kind of towards the center of your screen there. They've been working very closely alongside SpaceX throughout today's operation. So if you are just joining us, Dragon did undock from the International Space Station's forward port of the Harmony module at 7:57 a.m. Central Time this morning. Dragon then proceeded to have a couple of firings to undock from the space station, and then has since been swinging up and around to redock to the zenith port of the International Space Station. Dragon is now 20 meters away from that zenith port and completing a hold for the team on the ground to ensure everything looks good before they give the go to proceed with that final docking to the zenith port. Today's port relocation is occurring ahead of the crewed flight test of the Boeing Starliner vehicle, which will carry NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams to the International Space Station for a week-long test flight of the Starliner vehicle. That launch is scheduled for Monday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. And continuing to stand by for that hold at waypoint 2, that 20-meter mark away from space station. This is the final alignment and checkout of Dragon. We also take a look at any lighting conditions and confirm that all teams on the ground are ready for a final approach.
And once we do get that go for approach, we will have a soft capture of Dragon to the International Space Station prior to the 12 hooks driving into the International Space Station for a hard capture, and then the umbilical reattaching to the space station at its new port.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2 for TC. Just check in on your review of steps 5 and 6 per step 3.
Review is complete.
Houston copies.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground has pulled go for docking, so please confirm your visors are still down and that you are ready for approach 2.
SpaceX Dragon ready for approach 2. Visors still down.
Great news there.
Copy all. Ground will be enabling resume shortly, and as a reminder, once you're inside the crew hands-off points, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Great news there. We did hear confirmation that we are go for proceeding with docking this morning. We also heard them mention CHOP, which is crew hands off point. And that is where the crew will no longer be able to take over control of Dragon. The Dragon vehicle will be autonomous at that point.
That's right, Jesse, and that call for CHOP or crew hands-off point, as you mentioned, occurs about 2 meters.
There we did hear confirmation that we are go for proceeding with docking this morning. We also heard them mention CHOP, which is crew hands off point. And that is where the crew will no longer be able to take over control of Dragon. The Dragon vehicle will be autonomous at that point.
That's right, Jesse, and that call for CHOP or crew hands-off point, as you mentioned, occurs about 2 meters before contact.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. CC, monitor for steps 5 and 6 of 1.102.
Okay, inward.
And you heard it there, everyone on the ground go for docking. NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson, who is on board the International Space Station, is going to continue to monitor the redocking of the Crew-8 Dragon Endeavour from that the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony. Dragon is now 16 meters away from the International Space Station. Dragon now less than 15 meters away from the International Space Station.
Again, as we're approaching docking, there will be a soft capture followed by hard capture of the 12 hooks on Dragon to the International Space Station, and then followed by the installation of the umbilical. And again, we should hear a call out for CHOP, that crew hands-off point, again, 2 meters away from docking. And again, that means any aborts that need to be initiated will need to happen by Dragon's flight computer after that point rather than from the crew.
And meters.
Copy 10 meters.
Dragon is now less than 8 meters away. Expecting the call for CHOP, that crew hands-off period, here in just a couple meters at the 2 meter mark.
Copy, 2 meters.
One meter.
Copy, 1 meter. Stop capture confirmed.
Great news, we heard confirmation of soft capture of the Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station at 8:46 a.m. Central Time.
Again, that redocking occurred at 8:46 a.m. Central.
Ring retraction in progress.
Docking occurred over the eastern Indian Ocean northwest of Australia. You did hear the call out about that soft capture ring being retracted. This will continue until sensors indicate those hooks are ready to drive and create the hard capture. So again, Dragon has soft captured to the zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station following a port relocation maneuver from the forward port of the Harmony module. Once that soft capture ring is put into the correct place and the final hooks have driven, we do confirm that there is a hard mate. That is an airtight seal around the crew vehicle and the International Space Station. And then after hard capture is complete, we will expect a couple more leak checks and the hatch to be opened about 2 hours later. So a recap of what we've seen thus far this morning. Dragon undocked from the forward port of the International Space Station at 7:57 a.m. Central Time while flying east off of the coast of the Bahamas. Dragon backed away to 60 meters, swung out and above the space station towards that zenith port, then moved to waypoint 2, which is 20 meters away from the International Space Station, before making its final approach for docking, which occurred at 8:46 a.m. Central Time this morning while Dragon was flying over the East Indian Ocean west of Australia.
We are still waiting for confirmation of hard capture. We did hear a call out that the soft capture ring was being retracted. Once that's fully retracted, then we can begin driving the 12 hard hooks for the hard capture. And they will be driven 6 hooks at a time. So there will be 6 hooks that drive in first. Once those complete, then the second set of 6 hooks can then also drive into the International Space Station and confirm that hard capture.
Ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Great news there. Just heard that the soft capture ring retraction is now complete.
And with the soft capture ring retracted successfully, the next milestone that we'll look towards is the first set of 6 hooks driving. Following that, we'll have the second set of hooks driving, and you are getting a view on your screen now of Dragon docked to the International Space Station. This is a view from Dragon's camera of the zenith port of the International Space Station. That circular
Dragon Station, Houston, on the big loop, MTS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Copies.
2 copies.
And so that first set of hooks is now driving again. There's 12 in total. They drive in sets of 6. So the first 6 is beginning to complete that drive. Once all 12 are successfully driven, we will have what is called a hard capture. That circular object with the crosshair that you see in the middle of your screen there is the docking target. NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson affixed the docking target to the outside of the APAS hatch on the zenith port of the International Space Station earlier before closing it. Rather, it was already closed, but that creates that space between Dragon and station known as the vestibule. This portion will have to be repressurized before the crew inside Dragon does re-enter the International Space Station. Continuing to stand by as that first set of hooks drives. Everything going smoothly so far. And the first set of hooks is now closed, second set beginning to close.
Once that second set of hooks does close, the hard capture will be confirmed, and then the umbilical can then begin attached from Dragon to the International Space Station. As we saw, that the Dragon trunk is still attached to Dragon when it is not connected to the International Space Station. That is how Dragon gets power. But while it is docked and parked at the International Space Station, it can connect to the station's power and utilize power from there.
And once that second set is successfully driven, and after all docking events are completed, flight controllers will configure Dragon for docked operations and will reconnect power and data to the spacecraft to the crew currently inside Dragon. Again, that is NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Mike Barrett, Jeanette Epps, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin. Soon they will be able to get out of those spacesuits that they've been wearing for the entirety of today's port relocation, and will begin the operations to get the hatches back open. This will include pressurizing that vestibule and a new round of leak checks. Now, 10 minutes since Dragon made its new home on the International Space Station at International Docking Adapter 3, or the Zenith port on the Harmony module.
Hard capture is complete.
Dragon happy, hard capture complete.
And we did hear confirmation that that second set of hooks has successfully driven, giving us what we call a hard capture. And Crew-8 again has successfully docked to the Zenith port, or the space-facing port of the International Space Station. Crew-8 will now be able to get out of their spacesuits and begin the process of opening up the hatches. And all of this will take about 2 hours. But with the successful port relocation this morning, we're going to wrap up our coverage of Dragon's relocation from the forward port of Harmony to the Zenith port of Harmony in preparation for the historic crewed test flight of the Boeing Starliner vehicle, with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams aboard. You can watch live launch coverage beginning at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Monday, May 6th, ahead of launch at 10:34 p.m. Eastern. We do hope you'll join us then, but for now, this is Mission Control Houston.